Take my hand and come with me, darling, down to the shoreline. Take my hand and come with me, darling, down to the shoreline.
Hello and welcome to the Nature Garden podcast with me, Carl Steinson, and the weekending show team from Lionheart Radio. Thanks for joining us on a canny wee wander down the garden path and country lane with the birds and the bees and the flowers and trees. In this episode, it's been a wee bit chilly of late, but don't let that put you off gardening. Tom Pattinson's delving into late season colours and singing the praises of indoor plants. And it's National Tree Planting Week. Tom Cadwallender's freezing cold gannon along the shoreline in search of a small Arctic seabird. It's as tough as they come. And he's looking at the curlew as well and the pressures they're facing. Plus some top tips for the garden from Tom P. All coming up on the Nature Garden podcast. Hello. It's National Tree Planting Week, coinciding with, well, what can be a great time to plant trees as long as it's not too cold. Tom Pattinson's taking a look at the ins and outs of introducing a new tree or two to your garden space.
Hello. I thought I'd start this week by reminding you it's National Tree Planting Week. It begins today, Saturday, November the 23rd, and runs until Sunday, December the 1st. That's a week tomorrow. What is National Tree Planting Week? Well, it's an opportunity for individuals and groups throughout the country to do something, a small thing, in replacing trees that we've lost. Some through the bulldozing of areas in the rainforests throughout the world, some of them through disease. In fact, it was a disease that sparked off the National Tree Planting Week. Way back in the early 70s, Dutch elm disease wiped out millions of our trees in this throughout our country. And in response to that, the Tree Council decided in 1975 we'll launch a tree planting week once a year to remind people, and so people feel they're contributing towards the nature and the well-being of their own surroundings and the planet. And it's run ever since then. Where are you going to get the trees from? And where are you going to plant them? Well, I guess the choice begins at the local nursery, or of course you can do it mail order online. But if you go to the local nursery, you have a choice. You can see and pick your own. You'll find some of them are grown in pots, pot grown, so they have a lovely ball of root on. In fact, in theory, you could plant them any time in the year. They're expensive, more expensive than the bare-rooted type. But this is the time of year you can plant bare-rooted types, no soil on the roots. Examine them. If they're coming by mail through the post, then of course you've got to check them first as soon as they arrive. What generally happens is the roots are dried out a wee bit. You can get round that easily by filling a bucket with water, plunging the roots of your tree or any trees you've got into that bucket and leaving them certainly overnight. If there's frost around, you don't plant. It's not a good time to plant. You need to have a frost-free day. So if the frost, say, lingers for a few days, if you can break some soil, break the frost on the top, get the roots into the soil temporarily, not permanently, then do so. If you can do that on a mild day, it's a useful thing, a holding operation before you start planting. When you do plant, where are you going to plant? You can't just go outside your own property and plant on land which is owned by someone else. You have to have permissions, whether you're in a group or an individual. There must be permissions. So it's wise to follow that line up. Within your own property, you can plant anywhere you wish. If you own it, you own the land, the garden, it's yours. But what are you going to plant? And this is a careful one to consider, because ash, beech, oak and elm, for example, they'll go up tens of meters above into the sky, send a large canopy out that cuts out the light. That's not a good thing. And generally speaking, the area of the canopy, that is the branches and the leaves and everything above ground, generally is reflected by the roots underground. So if you plant too closely to the house, the roots are going to damage the foundations of your house or any structures in the garden. The top growth, the canopy, if it covers or reaches the guttering or the tiles, you have a problem there as well. Google for yourself online or search online and you'll find safe planting distances. You generally find for the taller trees, it's something in the nature of 10 meters, at least 10 meters, more if you can spare it, away from the house on any buildings. The smaller ornamental trees, say cherries, crab apples, their fairly safe distance or planting distance is at least 4 or 5 meters from the house. Bear that in mind when you're choosing a tree. And good luck. I hope you get some planting done or join a group doing the planting throughout the next week.
Tom Cadwallender's back from sunny Peru to a rather chilly Northumberland, and he's out and about in the thick of it on the coast, looking out for some small birds that are super tough fans of the Arctic weather. Over to you, Tom Cadwallender.
Gosh, it's freezing. I'm perished. I've got my thickest winter duvet jacket on. I've got gloves. I've got 2 pairs of trousers over trousers. I've got my thermals on and everything. Why? Well, it's cold for a start. But why am I cold? Because I've just been out onto the coast, onto the shore at Seaton Point locally. And we've got this really fantastic blow from the north. You may have seen on the weather forecasts this Arctic blast of cold northerly air. This wind is just blowing straight down through the North Sea. You think, well, why are you outside, you dafty? Well, actually, it's because I'm a keen bird watcher. I can't help myself. You know, at this time of year, in the winter time, back end of November, when the north wind blows from the Arctic, the high Arctic, things start to get stirred up there. There are these small birds up there that spend all their time on the sea. They are called little auks. And they're related to puffins, they're related to guillemots, to razorbills, and they're little auk gives the idea that they are quite small. In fact, they are smaller than the other guys, but they're not tiny. But they are smallish, and they are kind of at the bottom of the ladder when it comes to size. But anyway, the point is, these birds get displaced from their northern wintering areas. They love to be on the sea. These guys are tough as old boots. They love to be on the sea. They've got black wings and they've got white bellies, and they feed on small kind of fish that live in the cold ocean. They really are cold water specialists, no doubt about it. But anyway, back to the plot. They get blown, displaced from their northern kind of habitats down through into the North Sea. And this is a regular phenomenon. They'll get blown right down because of this blast, this icy blast. And when we bird watchers, when we see this, we kind of get out on the coastline, because all of these little auks are relocating. They're scooting. They don't want to be down here. They don't want to be down in the North Sea. They don't want to be off the Northumberland coast or further south. They want to be back in the Arctic. They want to be back up there. And they will pass by in their thousands. And just today, off the Northumberland coast, there must have been easily 1,000 birds, all told. People have been watching them from various points, and we were nipping down to the Seaton Point, and we got a few under our belt there. And almost as soon as I set my scope up, it was great actually. I sat down next to a pal, and I said, "Have you seen much?" And he said, "Yes." And I put my scope up. Almost the first bird I saw was a little auk scooting up, and Muriel was quite pleased to get her eye on that, because it's a good bird for your year list, and good bird for your monthly list for the patch. Anyway, we were watching these birds, and we must have seen about 30, 40, or perhaps even up to 50 of them, quite close in too. And they're quite spectacular when they go by. It's great fun. And there was a tale I was telling her, my friend actually, back in, about 10 years ago. I was looking for a similar situation. I was looking for little auks, big northerly blow. And I was sitting with a pal looking at the sea, and I was saying, why aren't we seeing these little auks? We're peering out there, looking hard. Why aren't we seeing these little auks? Then we just sort of took back from our telescopes and looked up, and they were actually flying over our heads, so on land, flying over our heads. It was incredible. They were going through like that. But yes, and the other species associated with them, we're seeing good numbers of kittiwakes. This will be the same principle. Kittiwakes, which breed in this part of the world, but they don't winter here. They'll be in the North Atlantic. They'll be out at sea, because they're really another tough as old boots species. And they get relocated, or displaced, if you like, back down into the North Sea, but they don't want to be here. And so they're scooting by in huge numbers. There's tens of thousands of those guys going past. So yes, today was a cold and, not miserable though. It was a cold day, because we got to see little auks. And it's not every day you get to see little auks. These Arctic little terriers, I think. They're brilliant, actually. And it cheers me up no end. And I'm really happy. And even though I'm freezing, I'm going to get back in, I'm going to have a hot toddy, and I'm going to be fine with my tales of little auks. But anyway, it's another tale from the North Sea, another tale of bird watching. Brilliant, love it. Gan canny, folks.
I'm Tom Heap from Countryfile, and you're listening to the Nature Garden podcast.
Tom Pattinson's enjoying some indoor plants and their cold weather cheer, like orchids and primulas on frosty cold days. Plants to keep you happy, whatever the weather, says Tom.
Well, those long, heady days of summer have passed, I'm afraid. The garden isn't looking as bright as then, but that doesn't mean there's absolutely nothing to see and enjoy, even fragrances from some of the shrubs. I'm thinking of the viburnum, bodlantense, dawn, pink tinged flowers, started flowering in late October, goes through to March, April, all the way through winter. Highly fragrant, beautiful. And then there's no fragrance coming from the winter jasmine, jasmine and nudiflorum with those yellow flowers, but it is there, and admirable to look at it and see how it stands up to the frosty evenings. And then, of course, there's the so-called autumn cherry, that for me It flowers all the way through. Starts flowering in that late October period, and it too goes up to the point of April. Beautiful, pale, pink-tinged flowers. I'm thinking it's Suppertella autumnalis. Dawn is the hybrid, the one I'm thinking of. Beautiful pink tinge and fragrant. There's the Mahonia, the long yellow racemes of the, and fragrant too, of the Mahonia japonica, Mahonia charity, all those things. But there are days when it's just not possible to get out into the garden. One of these occurred just this week. I woke up one morning, everything was covered in snow, just mounds where the shrubs were. Not much you can do then. Greenhouse work, of course. But I've got gardening indoors, and many of you have got an aspect of gardening, and plants that is, in your homes, which keep you pleasantly happy and occupied throughout the year. There's so many to choose from. I've brought quite a few of the plants of summer from the summer garden and summer greenhouse into the conservatory or garden room, as we call it, because there's so many flowers in it, in the house. The thing we need in there is a modicum of warmth overnight for those frosty nights. So I have a heater which is set at 10 degrees Celsius, which is the minimum I put my potted plants through. So some of the plants in there are in dormancy, they're just ticking over throughout winter, and quite a few of them are coming up to flower, or they have berries, or they have some super foliage. And that's what I'm enjoying at the moment. So the other day, when it was snowy outside, I was doing a bit of research through the catalogues for plants for next year and seeds for next year, and in their company, it's so good. So how do I look after them during winter? Well, of course, watering is important. Those in dormancy, I don't give them very much water at all. In fact, 2 or 3 lovely geraniums or pelargoniums with fancy coloured leaves, they're just ticking over. I've pruned them back, and the compost gets quite dry, but they'll take that in their stride. Little water for them, for goodness sake, not too much at this time of year. Just the opposite of summer. But there are some in active growth, and those are the ones I water when they require it. Sometimes it's once a week, occasionally it's twice a week, depends upon the temperature during the day in that room they're in, the garden room. The higher the temperature, the greater the evaporation through the leaves and from the compost. So watering, gauge what is going to be watered. So what do I have in there? Well, I have cyclamen. Of course, I have some Azalea indica, 2 of those. It's a dwarf azalea, which is flowering this time of year. Poinsettia, which is that there's beautiful scarlet bracts. There's a yellow bract and there's a white bract one as well. Quite a variety these days. And I have an orchid, the Phalaenopsis orchid, which is the simplest orchid ever to look after. It's been flowering for a year non-stop. Exactly. We bought it last November, and it's kept producing flowers. A real beauty. And then there's those annuals, the primulas, Opconica cuensis, sinensis, and they're just annual plants, but they're flowering now and cheering us up. Then the cineraria, beautiful flowers, calceolaria, lady's purse flowers, just gorgeous. There's so much choice. So get yourself to the garden centre and buy 1 or 2 of these plants, and they'll keep you happy, put a smile on your face, even if it's snowing outside in the morning.
Now, a bit of a tricky one. Tom Cad's looking into the world of the curlew and some of the concerns about their numbers and extinctions. It's a bit sad, this report, but there's no point hiding away from the brutal facts. Take it away, Tom Cadwallender.
spending time on the Aln Estuary. And you've heard me mention the Aln Estuary before. It's my local patch. And we're quite privileged to have lots of interesting birds here during the winter time. And one of the species I'm particularly keen on is the curlew, or to give it its full name, the European curlew. And they're not the Northumbrian breeding birds, because the birds that breed in Northumberland and in the UK generally will spend their winters down in the southwest and perhaps even into northern Europe. No, the birds that we have here are birds from northern Scandinavia, and they'll come here for the winter time. They'll spread right through east coast of UK and indeed into the west coast of the UK as well. And they'll spend all their winter here, and we'll have something like 250 to 300 on this local estuary. It's quite a small estuary too, but they'll be feeding on the mud, they'll be feeding in fields depending on how soft the substrate is. But it's quite interesting that there's these kind of curlews, and you'll be familiar with them. You've heard me talk about them before. They're long-billed, decurved, and they'll stand about sort of 10 to 12 inches, perhaps even 14 inches tall. Females tend to be bigger than males, and they have longer bills than the males, so they'll be the big ones. But it's interesting that there are a number of species of curlews around the world. In fact, there are 9 species of curlews, these long-billed birds, and they're all kind of very similar. And the curlew that we have, as I've mentioned, is the Eurasian or European curlew. Closely related to that is the Eurasian whimbrel, which breeds in northern Europe and winters in Africa. Next along, we have the long-billed curlew, which is almost identical, apart from the length of the bill, to the European one. The long-billed curlew is found in North America. And there is little whimbrel, or little curlew as it's sometimes called. And again, that's another North American species, very similar to the whimbrel that we have in this country. Next along is the Far Eastern curlew. Far Eastern curlew is the bird that's found right out in Asia, but they have really long bills as well. It seems to be a common denominator, this. But we do have the Hudsonian whimbrel, which is a North American version of our whimbrel, and the taxonomists will say that it's a different species. Some people think it is, some people think it isn't. Then we go down to a species called the bristle-thighed curlew. That's a name to conjure with, is it not? They breed in West Alaska and winter on some of the atolls in the Pacific Ocean, which is quite an amazing feat when you think about it. And there are 2 other species of curlews which are kind of really sort of causing us some real concern. Not that the other species are not causing us concern, because the Eurasian curlew is under some pressure. And we often hear about the dwindling numbers of the Eurasian curlew breeding in the UK, and that is indeed a concern. But there are other species which are further on the brink, and they are there's the Eskimo curlew, which is a North American species, and it breeds in the far, far north, or it used to, and they'll winter in South America. But there hasn't been a record of Eskimo curlew since the 1960s, and that gives you a clue. There used to be millions and millions of them, so they say, reading the old texts. And you think, well, what happened to them? Well, hunting, for example, really sort of caused an awful lot of issues for these birds, and change in habitat. But hunting pressure in North America has been kind of downfall of this species, the Eskimo curlew, can you imagine? And the other species of curlew that we kind of think about, it is the slender-billed curlew, quite an evocative species. And I'm just reading a little kind of article or paper that's just been produced. And a sad news indeed, sad news, because the Eskimo curlew, last sighting was in Morocco, was in 1984. And the sad news is this paper has produced the idea that it's been declared extinct. Imagine that. We shall never see the like of Eskimo curlew or slender-billed curlew ever again, because they have been made extinct. It's quite frightening when you think about it, really, in this day and age. We are losing species hand over fist. And what's happening? You know, it's pressures on the species. Whilst the slender-billed curlew is a bird that was kind of on the brink when in modern times, and it's now kind of turned up in the UK in only very, very small numbers, if indeed at all. There's a kind of a record back from the late 1980s, 1990s of a bird in Northumberland, but that's now been disputed, and I think it's been struck off the list. But yes, it's gone. Eskimo curlew, gone. Bristle-thighed curlew. The bristle thighs are quite evident on this species, but under an awful lot of pressure. All of these curlew species are somewhere on the ICUN list, somewhere. They're saying that they're kind of endangered. And the European curlew, the Eurasian curlew, is heading the same way. It's now on the red data list, which we have in the UK. And whilst they breed here, they winter here, there's an awful lot of problems we have with them. And it's mainly pressures from loss of habitat. And, you know, the damp corners of uplands have largely gone, and the breeding habitat is just disappearing hand over fist. It's a real concern, and it's frightening. But the sad news is all these long-billed wading birds are on the edge. They're so specialised, they're on the edge of extinction. And then, as I've just mentioned, the slender-billed curlew is now officially extinct. What a sad world this is when we think about these birds going extinct. Oh, it's kind of depressing, really. Sorry about that.
And so here's Tom with some things to be getting on with in the garden.
Gosh, Carl, I'm pleased you remembered the tea break. I got so carried away talking gardening, I forgot about it. Anyway, it was a very nice break. Thank you. It's jobs for the week time. Bulbs. Hippeastrum. You probably heard of Hippeastrum. It's for sale this time of year. Either just buy the bulbs individually yourself, or buy a little package. Sometimes it makes a nice little present for someone for their birthday or Christmas. It comes in a package with a container, the compost, and the large bulb. All you have to do is moisten the compost, get it into the pot, moisten it, and just stand the Hippeastrum bulb on top. And you watch it grow. That's part of the fun. Put it in a well-lit window in a slightly warm room. It doesn't get too cold at night, and it sends a shoot out. The roots are developing all the time, of course, and this shoot grows and grows. It goes up like a skyrocket, 30 centimetres, 35 centimetres, 40 centimetres, and so it goes on. Quite amazing, really, and beautiful 3 lily-like flowers at the top on a single stem, sometimes 4, and when they're faded, they last quite a while. When they fade, you just let them die down naturally with the whole of the stem, quite a thick stem, and all the goodness goes back into the bulb for next year. It's a perennial, keep it for next year. The other bulb on my mind is hyacinths. If you had a chance to put some down or pot some up and put them in the dark weeks and weeks ago to form some roots, they should be coming out of the dark now because the shoots are ready to show. And you'll have those flowering just before Christmas as well. You can buy them, individual pots, well-rooted, just small pots, with the shoots showing above, ready to grow, and buy them in 3s or 5s and get them into a bowl with some fresh compost and cover the top of the bowl with some moss. It looks very natural, and they'll come and flower in that. The moss, in my case, comes from the lawn, because the natural lawn, it's quite tidy actually, but there's quite a bit of moss in. I don't fight against it. The birds use it for nesting, and I use it to top off the bills and of bulbs at this time of year. Moving on, I love flower arrangements and foliar arrangements. I have some beautiful foliage plants in the garden, some silver variegated, some golden variegated. There's the euonymus, emerald and gold, and emerald gaiety. Both of them are variegated. There's the eleagnus with the silverish tinge to the leaves, beautiful. Pittosporum, silvery grey and green leaves. And of course the stems of dogwood, the red dogwood, and that lovely pale green, almost yellow one at times. That is Cornus Spathii, that's it. Yes, lovely stems to put in, coloured stems. And of course the flowers, Viburnum tinus, that's the evergreen viburnum. It has white groups of white flowers in a cluster. Quite pleasant, not much fragrance to it, but it looks good in an arrangement. Gosh, there's much more to tell you, but just try using some of the items from the garden for arrangements. Bring them into the house and have some good cheer in the house as well. It's nature's planting time, don't forget that, which means that anywhere in between now and the point of spring next year, say late March, if there's no frost, you can actually plant plants that you brought in, introduce them to your garden, and especially bare-rooted plants, that is, digging them up without a ball of soil around the roots. Ideal time. If they come from the nurseryman in a package, if you've ordered them by mail order, then check them to see if they're dry. If they are dry, just simply fill a bucket with water in the garage, plunge the roots into the bucket and leave them for a day or so, and then plant them when you get the time. You can also look around the herbaceous border or herbaceous banks in the border. It's a good time for dividing them up, splitting them apart, digging them up, splitting them apart, replanting and making some new plants for yourself. Then, of course, if you're shifting one or two plants around, too heavy to lift, say a young apple tree, it's in the wrong place, then simply lay some fabric down next to it, dig it out, drag it up out of the hole onto the fabric, and drag it on a sledge-like fabric to the next point of planting. Whatever you're doing over the next few days, enjoy your gardening.
You've been listening to gardener Tom Pattinson and birder Tom Cadwallender from the British Trust for Ornithology. Don't forget you can listen back to all of our previous programmes via the Nature Garden podcast. That's the Nature Garden podcast. I'm Carl Steinson, thanks for listening, and enjoy your gardening and time outdoors with nature. Bye for now.